Alright, today we're going to be canning some deer meat. Super simple. We're just going to try and make this as quick as possible. So let's get into it. This is netted. My grandpa got this really nice 9-point this year. We're mostly meat hunters. We usually shoot doe, but he happened to come across this beauty. That's what we're using for meat today. Alright, so we got all of our meat cut up off the bone, and what we did was we just cubed it up into like bite-sized pieces. So whatever you think you'd want to, eat in one go without having to cut it up with a knife or something, that's what we do. We're using 16-ounce jars, pint jars. You can use half pints or quarts or whatever size jar you want, but this recipe is going to be for 16-ounce jars. And what we did was we just ran them through the dishwasher first, and we just pulled them out. The dishwasher's still nice and steamy. We did the same thing with the lids. So wash the cans, wash the lids, then make sure they're clean and sterilized. And the next thing we're going to do is fill them up. Here's the recipe I tried printing out for you guys, and I accidentally put tablespoons instead of teaspoons for everything, but I just crossed it out. So make sure you use teaspoons. I like to put mine in first, so we're doing a half teaspoon of salt, canning salt, in each one. Then we like to balance that salt out with some pepper. So we'll fill each one with a half teaspoon of pepper. Then we're going to use some smoked paprika. This will give it a little flavor. It'll be nice. And we're going to do a half teaspoon of that. Really, all this is preference. I might have went a little heavy on the pepper, so whatever you like, just do what you want to do. Okay, the next thing we're going to do is put some broth in here. I have some liquid broth from a roast we made. My grandma likes to use the cubed broth. You can get them in the store, and they're really good. They add a lot of flavor, but we have this broth, and it's good, so we're going to be putting that in instead. Now, you don't want to add too much liquid because the meat, whenever it's cooking, will actually add a lot of liquid. It'll pretty much fill up the whole jar. So I'm doing about a teaspoon of broth, and this will just give it a little flavor. And I also like to do it once I have all my dry ingredients in there so that I can kind of wet everything up and distribute it a little better into the jar. Okay, the second to last thing we're going to add is some minced garlic. Now, you can put cloves in here as well. You probably want to do 1 or 2, and that's if you like garlic. You don't have to put it in here, but I think if you like cooking, you like garlic. So I'm just going to use a spoon and kind of dab a little bit of, maybe like a half spoonful in each one, and it should give it some really nice flavor. Last and the most important ingredient is the deer meat. So what you're going to do is get one of these, and this is going to keep any debris from getting on the brim of the jar whenever you're stuffing these things full. And you want to put them about up to the thread line of the jar there. You don't want to overfill them because you need some room for air, and these are going to get full of liquid at the very end. So what we also wanted to show you was that you're going to probably need about 12 ounces of meat per jar. We just weighed it for you, and that's about what you're going to need. So 12 ounces per jar, a little under a pound for each one. So you also want to just go with a sterile rag and clean the top of your jars just to make sure there's no debris on the top, because if there is, it can interfere with the seal and not preserve it. Okay. We're going to go ahead and put all the lids on, make sure they're nice and tight, not too tight. But like I said, these are all washed in the dishwasher, so I'm going to put all these on and throw it in the canner. I don't know if this is the right thing to do, but if you want, you can shake it up a little just to try and spread that seasoning around, but it might help get a little more mixed in with the meat. So we're just going to put these in the canner with no water yet. We like to fill it up with water afterwards, just so that you know you're putting the right amount in. Once you get them in there, you can fill them up. We're going to probably do about 3/4 of the height of the jar. Make sure you look at the instructions for your canner specifically, because they're all different, but this works for me. So you can see they're just under the lid there. So we're going to go ahead and put this on the oven. Put the lid on. We have a 15-pound weight that we're going to be using because we are at about 1,400 feet above sea level. If it's under 1,000, I think you want to use a 10-pound weight, but like I said, make sure you check with your manufacturer instructions for your pressure cooker. So we're not going to start the timer until this starts shaking, and I'll show you what that looks like. So now you can see we have a steady rattle up top there with our 15-pound weight. And I know my stove from doing this before. I'm going to take it down from a high heat to about a quarter heat. And as long as that has a steady rattle, you don't want it to be going too crazy, but you want it to be steady. And then you set your timer for 75 minutes. And as soon as your timer goes off, you're going to just want to shut the stove off and wait. Whoa, won't focus. You're going to wait for this to stop. Once that stops, there will still be pressure in it, so don't open your lid. This will fall down. Okay, so this stopped. This has gone down. What I always like to do to double check and make sure there's no pressure in there is wiggle this around, and if there is, you'll hear it. And so I usually just lift that off. Then you know there's no pressure in there. So you're going to pop the lid off. It's going to be nice and steamy. Be careful, it'll be hot. Then you're going to go ahead and grab these. Pull them out of here. I try and tip the water off the top sometimes. Set them down on a rag. You can see how much juice is in them, and it looks like all that seasoning made it up to the top, so that's good. And yes, some of them will still be boiling. And now what you're going to do is leave these set for 12 to 24 hours, and this little button should be pressed in by then, and you're ready to eat them. So these are 8-ounce jars I made yesterday. We're going to open it up. So you can store them without these on, but you're better off just keeping them on unless you need these for other jars. So I usually just open it with a bottle opener, like this. Or I just use my fingers, and it's ready to eat. You can heat it up if you want, but most of the time, I just eat it cold. Thanks for watching. Subscribe for more.